Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Transistance. I'm one of your hosts, Genevieve Bergman, and we're going to be covering some of the news and items of interest that have happened around the world over the last week that impact the transgender, non-binary, non-conforming, and intersex community, as well as the wider two-spirit LGBTQIAP+ community. So, we hope that you will join us. You're free to ask questions in the chat, and if you happen to know of any articles that may be of interest, you can of course send those to any of the hosts that you see here tonight through our media or through the Transverse website, the Discord server. So please feel free to bring our attention to anything that you may know about, and we'll try to do our best to include that. And now let the other hosts introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Marla. I didn't come up with anything funny this week. Let's go.
Okay, so a few years ago, the Supreme Court upheld the idea that marriage equality for same-sex couples was legal, and therefore states could now begin to integrate into their systems a law base that did not prohibit individuals from seeking marriage who happen to be same-sex. Not all states have wanted to comply with that. In fact, what they have done is they have tried to slow down the process of integration, of implementation, of allowing same-sex couples to get married. One such state happens to be Virginia. Legislation was passed in both chambers of the legislature last year that would have repealed the constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriages. But now it seems like that has kind of hit a bit of a hang-up. A House subcommittee voted down on Tuesday of last week what would have advanced the repeal to let the voters decide. And this is what Republican delegates said was the reason why they stopped this measure from advancing. They said they did not like the language that was going into the amendment, saying that the wording marriage is inherent in the liberty of persons was bad language. And here's where it got worse. Because their argument for saying that marriage is inherent in the liberty of persons, their argument was it would lead to polygamy and child marriages. So essentially, it would be used to say that same sex couples being allowed to get married equates them to pedophiles or polyform relationships. Now, as a person who teaches and educates on different forms of sexuality and different expressions of relationship, polyform relationships are becoming normalized. We're going to see the discussion of things like multiple marriages, and we're going to see discussions of how to create legal acceptance of wider understandings of intimate relationships. Child marriages, which in this case really does need to be zeroed in on, because the funny thing is that some of these states who are standing in the way of the same sex marriage, and any of them that are using this argument that it would allow for child marriages, you have to keep in mind that some states allow for the marriage of individuals who are 15 years with parental consent.
So it's already a
But
thing.
right. So basically, it's the LGBT community. If they get the opportunity to marry someone of the same sex, then obviously it opens the door to all of these horrible evils in the world that are already existing and being justified in these states. So we can't have liberty because it'll lead to bad things like book burnings.
Yeah, I mean, also there's already a polygamy law, a law against polygamy in Virginia. So, that even that excuse doesn't make sense in this
Right.
situation. And it just sounds exactly like the same nonsense slippery slope argument that they used back when gay marriage was first being passed federally. Oh, then you're going to be able to marry children. They're going to be able to marry your dog. They like just this absolute nonsense to
Yeah.
demonize and create panic and make us look like some kind of monsters, some kind of perverted monsters. And they're kind of doing the same thing now. I don't know about you. How many live streams have you had someone come in and be like, "I'm transracial," like they
Mm-hmm.
just made some like miraculous point. Like, no, you didn't. Like such like it's all slippery slope nonsense. It very rarely makes any sense when people turn to those arguments,
And
and it also makes no sense here.
this is one I don't understand. The transracial one is one I don't understand. Transracial is an existence.
Yeah, but I mean, still, I mean, I think the concept of it is, if you can trans your gender, you can trans A, B, C, and D, and, completely ignoring the fact that there's a big difference between gender and race and gender and ethnicity. They're like, gender is a part of every human's existence,
Right.
um, both male and female parts of it, man and woman parts of it, or you might exist outside of it. You experience it every day. It is put on you from birth and put into you from birth. I mean, and I mean, it also like, I don't know if you saw my recent TikTok that was a joke, but I wrote, it was something along the lines of, you're appropriating womanhood, because now there are also a lot of people like, it's like you're appropriating a culture. My response is, don't worry, I'm half woman on my mother's side.
I
It's
did
a
see
part
that one.
of it's a part of all of us. Like, it is not the same thing. You're not making some big, big brain argument. Like, you're just trying to be divisive and using nonsense arguments.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. They're definitely trying to use, but they don't understand the words they are using. And that's where the problem gets. In using those words, they then morph the definition. And so somebody says, well, you're appropriating womanhood. We've talked a lot about in the last few years about the appropriation of culture by the white culture of American.
Yes.
Notice a white culture of American. There's an American white culture, no doubt about it. And it has done a lot of good to appropriate as much as it can. I'm sorry. Tex-Mex is not a thing, and it wasn't a thing until Texans learned how to make Mexican food, you know? So, hang on just a moment here.
Yeah.
Emily, cut away. Y'all take the next news story. I need to take care of something over on TikTok.
You got it.
Okay.
Ooh, I'm excited for this story.
Let's
Okay,
see,
not the next
okay.
story, but whatever Jeannie's dealing with. Do you have anything else to say about this one before we go on?
No, I'll let it go.
Okay.
Dealing on stuff with stuff behind the scenes, so I feel like y'all covered it well. Moving on, Joe Biden forcefully condemns hateful Florida "Don't Say Gay" bill and vows to protect LGBT kids. Marla, did you get a chance to read this one and figure out what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's great and all. Basically, it's the president saying that the Florida bill, which I think we've talked about almost every week now for 3 weeks, that, prohibits the teaching of any LGBTQIA plus material in schools and anything about our existence. The president has said that he is against it and that he stands with the LGBTQIA plus community. The White House said that it is just being used to attack LGBTQIA plus kids, which is absolutely a fact. Yeah, all around, I mean, this is a positive message, but what the federal government can do about it is a completely different story, right? I don't know that the Supreme Court would be able to do anything regarding this. Even if they could, they're mostly conservative, so I would not expect it to happen. So it is nice to have the president's support, but whether anything can be done is doubtful.
That's the unfortunate pessimistic look that reality kind of brings to us a lot of times these days, right? Of what can the government actually do? That's why it's so important to get out and be active on local political levels, because it's the local levels where they can really really affect these things. We've got an article at the end of the show tonight about something that's going on at a local high school, and it's like there are very small focused areas, just your local area, where there's a lot that needs to be done there, and then from there grow up, instead of trying to go from the federal government down, when a lot of times they don't care. They've got systems in place that negate any change that you'd want to make sometimes. So yeah, that's another just stone cast for getting off your butt and doing local political activism, and just getting active in your local area and making sure that you're putting people in place right around you that are going to do the things that you want and have a positive impact, instead of keeping the same old crap going. I see Jeannie's back.
I am.
Jeannie, we were just talking about the president, bashing the Florida bill.
Yes.
And Marla's kind of response to that was, that's great to have his support and everything, but what effect will he actually be able to have on this?
Well, there's something to keep in mind, that right now we do not have the the respect of the presidential office that it used to have here in the United States. It used to be the president could lead the nation by getting in front of them and saying something. But now we know that is not the case. But by the president getting up and saying, listen, for all of you who are a part of the LGBTQI plus community, and especially the kids who will be impacted, that is a voice of comfort. That is a voice saying, there is someone who has some power. There is a person who has some authority. There is a person who represents something bigger than the local situation. That if the president says, you are not forgotten, and that can be cultivated in the lives of those who hear that, then they know they're not left to their own devices. And I think that's, I mean, for me, yeah, President Biden is not going to be able to do a huge amount to stop the Florida bill from moving forward. And we know it's moving forward. But at the same time, what the president has available is the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, the Department of, Health and Human Services. All of those things come to bear in determining if this law gets in place and we begin to see a natural decline in the well-being of LGBTQI plus people, in addition, or especially in the lives of kids and youth, then we will see many more initiatives being pushed from the federal level back into the states to say, look, we have to take care of this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Next article. Australia shelves dangerous, divisive religious discrimination bill in incredible U-turn. What's happening here?
Australia was trying to advance a bill that would allow for religious people to claim discrimination in the face of LGBT presence, in moving forward. So, religious community in Australia was basically saying, look, the gays, the queers, they are discriminating. They're making it so that everybody can discriminate against the church. And there was a full head of steam behind this discrimination bill that would have offered protections to anti-LGBT plus religious institutions in Australia. They passed all of the amendments that were necessary. But somewhere along the line, someone said, this is a bad idea. And they pulled the legislation so that they wouldn't commit a really bad publicity issue. And I think that's what we're looking at. It was definitely a publicity. It was an image thing. The bill would have allowed for transgender youth to be expelled. It would allow for LGBT plus children and adults to be discriminated against. And all of that was based upon whether or not a religious person felt like they were being threatened, intimidated, harassed, or vilified.
That was by LGBT people that if they felt like they were being discriminated against by them or something, sort
if
of like
a religious group felt that they were being attacked by someone or a group representing an LGBTQIAP plus position, then they could cry discrimination.
So just a blanket gay panic, trans panic defense, basically, on all of life.
Yeah, pretty much.
Marla, what do you feel about this one?
I mean, there's also was there not elements in this article that made it seem like some of them felt that some changes to the bill would just make it not bad enough, that they wouldn't be hurting trans kids enough, they wouldn't be hurting LGBTQ kids enough, and they were like, no,
Yeah.
all the way or none of the way, which, my God, just such a bad look. I mean, I assume that's right. That's probably why some of them swap sides. But it's so vile. It's so vile that you have this absolutely disgustingly harmful bill, and it gets a little less disgusting, and you're like, yeah, like you're just now we haven't been able to hurt people enough.
Yeah.
I'm all or nothing. It's these people are sociopaths in every way that can be described.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why did it not work? There we go. A lot of ads on this one. Religious discrimination bill will not protect trans
I
students
can't
from
hear Emily.
expulsion. Simon Birmingham.
Emily, you're muted, sweetie.
Yeah, it just messed up on your end because your video was Marla's video was doing some bad things. So I tried to refresh, but it did some funky things. So let's hit that again. Religious discrimination bill will not protect trans students from expulsion. Simon Birmingham confirms. This is more follow-up articles on the same one, Jeannie, or is this a different one? Shit.
Correct bathroom.
This program.
What's happening here, Jeannie?
Yeah, we touched on this last week that South Dakota was making the move to hang on, sorry y'all. We had talked about how South Dakota was moving to pass two different bills that would impact transgender youth. The first was the one that passed to prohibit transgender females from participating in athletics. But the other one was going to be to ban transgender youth students from using bathrooms that aligned with their identity. And that bill had a lot of steam behind it. It looked like it was going to pass also, but lawmakers have killed that bill. So I don't know what's happening. I don't know if this is going to be a matter of they got a conscience, they read the law that was passed by the Supreme Court, or they have something worse in mind.
Yeah, and I mean their excuse. I mean, it just seemed like an excuse. You know, they basically were like, "We're not the school board. We don't. Well, we're giving the school the rights to make those decisions." Since when have conservatives ever done that? They always cry freedom, freedom from government until they can do something to harm marginalized communities, and then they'll happily put any law into place. If they backed off of this, it's not because they wanted the schools to have freedom of choice.
Oh, no. No. Em, you okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm glad to see when these bills falter, and that's a win, but they're not getting taken down for the right reasons, for strong enough reasons, of humanity and understanding, and the fact that it is understood that being trans is part of life. Like it is just scientific proof. There's scientific proof that trans is a real thing. It's not a choice. All of these things. It's just that the bill isn't strong enough, or it's not accomplishing what they want to do. Like Marla said, it's not hurting the LGBT community enough, or it's just not going to pass the muster when it comes to the Supreme Court. It's like I said, I would prefer it if these were being struck down on moral grounds of like Marla keeps saying how horrible these are, and actually point out what is going on and what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's good that they're getting canceled, that they're kind of going by the wayside here and there, but it's more with a whimper than the bang that I would like to see.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was not able to get the most recent updated list, but I'm getting ready to start doing the research on how many bills have been introduced already so far this year. There is another strong push. 2022, we've seen another push to bring more anti-trans legislation into state legislatures. So last year was definitely one form of attack. Now we're seeing a doubling of that attack this year. So speak to your representatives, speak to your senators, speak to your local council members, talk to people, get out there and make yourself aware of what's being done in the places where you live. Because if no one is speaking on our behalf, whether that is trans people or allies or family members, then these things are going to go through without any resistance. Get out there, throw a fuss, make a mess of this stuff. Show people that this is not going to happen.
I love it.
I do wonder, looking at this, if there's some amount of, they were more afraid that this bill would make it to a state courthouse or even to the federal courts and might harm their ability to pass other anti-trans laws. If they said you're not allowed to single out trans students this way, they might not be able to then do that with other things, sports and
Right.
um, other legislation.
Yeah, this was a strategic move. This was not a compassion move. This was not about thinking about trans kids. This was about how do we get the most out of the legislation that we pass, and how do we get the most momentum moving to ensure that we can overturn any securities in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They know there's not a chance that these are going to survive at the state or the district courts. They're wanting to push this through, and they're trying to get these removed at the federal level. They want the Supreme Court to decide on these things. So this was about strategy. It was not about compassion. It was not about a moral compass finally ringing true to we want to protect all people.
And we get to see some of the people that are the reason why that kind of stuff is happening. A GOP candidate is angry that students aren't allowed to laugh at transgender kids anymore. What is this human trash bag up to, Jeannie?
Oh, no, no, no. This one's Marla's.
Okay.
What? Just because I made it? This is what we do. Like, if I made a TikTok about it, it goes to me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially when you do one with such passion and eloquence for the position.
Sure, that's what it is. So Shelley Luther is currently running for the Texas House. Now, Shelley Luther, if you recognize her name, she's that person who got arrested for keeping her salon open during the height of the pandemic. She was jailed for it and then very quickly let go by the governor, trying to look like, a hero to the anti-vax, anti-quarantine crowd. So Shelley used to be a Spanish teacher. And now that she's running for a House seat, that topic came up for her in a question in a debate. And in that answer, she said, I got to read the whole thing. Quote, "I'm not comfortable with the transgenders. the kids that they brought in my classroom and they said that this kid is transgendering into a different sex, that I couldn't have kids laugh at them. She was lamenting on stage that if there are transgender kids in school, that her students and probably herself were not allowed to torment and bully them. She then proceeded to have about a 7-second pause where her brain caught up to her and she realized that she said the quiet part out loud, and then continued onward to say that this was about school choice. And that is what their whole argument is. Their whole argument, this whole argument for them is to get public funds to send kids to private institutions that don't teach facts, that teach hate, that exclude transgender kids, that exclude LGBTQIA plus kids, so that they can teach their children to hate and not to learn about other people in the world and society.
There's so much going on where there's so many people fighting for the right to discriminate against others. They're pushing back against all this stuff because it's taking away their right to discriminate and to bully others.
Yeah. And I mean, they're not even in this case, they're asking for public funds to do so, which just makes it all that more worse. I should also point out Shelley's response was basically that it became the center of focus for her students in every single class, and they couldn't learn Spanish. I don't think it became the center of every single class and every single lesson. I doubt that. But I think it's ridiculous that someone who wants to control the state to some partial bit couldn't control a goddamn classroom.
Yeah. And see, that is probably the reason why the classroom was focused on transgender students, was because she was the one who was having a problem keeping her mouth shut about transgender students.
Yep.
Or at least in some way, she would be trying to find some way to instigate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know exactly how she did it. It's not written in this article, but I saw an interview, or she did like a little video that I saw on a different platform when I was making my video, where basically she said, well, it became a problem because Spanish is a gendered language. And I'm like, I bet you kept using it as an excuse to misgender those students.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm quite certain that it led into a discussion every time the use of gendered language became a point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you were saying, it just reflects on the teacher's inability to lead and get control of the class. If someone comes in who is from a different country, has a different dialect, looks different, is very overweight, or is an extremely attractive woman with large breasts or something, like there's going to be disruptions. Like you have to be able to get control of your class and keep them from laughing or pointing or disrupting based on these things. Bullying is still an issue that you have to control as a teacher, and saying that you're bummed that you and your students are not allowed to bully kids is I don't know. I can't think of anything more ridiculous than that. I really can't.
I can, but it probably involves violence, and I shouldn't talk about it.
So we'll move on then. Equality's watchdog wants to exclude most trans people from single-sex spaces, leak suggests. What's going on here? Who's this Equality's watchdog?
So it is it's a group in, I believe it's centered in the UK, and they were talking about how those spaces that are single sex, such as restrooms, changing rooms, those type of things that have a specific gender, they want to exclude transgender people from those single sex spaces. So essentially, it is a human rights organization that is supposedly a human rights organization who is saying transgender people should not be allowed in single sex spaces. And so now that organization is being called down by basically most of the European Union for causing a problem because they are excluding the transgender community from accessing those services, restrooms, changing rooms, anything that would have a gendered single sex, permission, not allowing transgender people to access that. And they're saying, no, you cannot do this. And so they're looking to repeal the good standing of this human rights organization just because they took this stand.
Great. That's great news. That's exactly what should happen.
So they want to make it so that you need this gender, what is it? A gender recognition certificate.
Mm. Yeah, you need
If
your
you want-
papers to prove that you're transgender enough.
Yes. And they are completely ignoring the fact, one, that less than 1% of trans people in the UK have that paper because it's very difficult to get. The paper, I don't believe, it doesn't recognize non-binary people, so they have no options there. And in addition to that, as pointed out in the article, the Equality Act, you don't actually need a GRC to be protected by the Equality Act. So this is, in the end, all nonsense they're trying to convince businesses that they can get away with this. They can't.
No.
I don't know if that's the goal, is to get it brought to a court of some kind, to be looked at. And also, I mean, I think I bring this point up every single time. At the end of the day, if you are splitting things up by sex at birth, you are normalizing trans men in these female spaces. They're worried about cis men being able to, dress up like women and sneak in there all the time. If you normalize trans men in those spaces, guess what? No one needs a disguise, right? It's just easy, walk right the hell in. So their thought pattern and their reasoning behind this stuff, it never goes past step one.
No, well, it never goes past the genitals.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is all about. It goes down to the genitals, and it doesn't matter about the rest.
But what's going to happen when they find out that trans men exist? Like, what's going to...
Right? Exactly. What are we going to do when intersex people are discovered for the first time by Republicans? What are they going to do when they find out that there is a whole class, a whole group of people who don't have XX or XY chromosomal patterns?
Or males who have XX and females who have XY.
Right? Or somebody who has both sets of primary sexual characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to flip and lose their mind when they are encountering this, because then what do they do about it? Because their whole argument of, well, it's the chromosomes or biology or anything else, those of us who've been doing due diligence and saying, no, you cannot say that because you are excluding our intersex siblings. You cannot use that argument because there are people who defy that very argument. So when they finally wake up and they discover this, and they're going to like, well, now what do we do? And I love the idea. Well, let's build them their own bathrooms. No, let's not build them their own bathrooms, because nobody can afford that.
Yeah.
So.
And nobody wants that. Like, I mean, I can't say that. I mean,
Oh,
I'm sure there are
there
plenty of
are
folks
people
out
who
there
want.
that would love, non-binary bathrooms or gender non-specific bathrooms, and it does solve some things, but but okay, Mississippi House passes an anti-trans bill. This time, the target isn't kids. Well, thank God for that, I guess. Small win. Jeannie,
No,
what's
but it is
happening here
still
in Mississippi now?
it is still a group that has so many of their rights denied them. This actual House Bill 1099 in Mississippi, it's in the House of Representatives. It was passed by the House of Representatives. It's now going forward. This bill would ban transgender people who happen to be incarcerated from submitting a name change request or submitting a request to change their gender marker. Now, prisoners are already, I mean, those who are incarcerated already have so many of their rights removed. But this is basically saying you do not even have the right to request a gender or name change from the legal system. To go in and say, I just need, okay, this, right? This right here is the Arkansas Name and Gender Change Guide. This is what they are not being allowed to access. This bill would basically say that this is contraband in any prison.
And again, I guess the thinking behind that is that trans people who put in that for that paperwork or for that change would then want to change prisons from a predatory standpoint.
No.
No.
Basically, they're wanting a person to retain their real identity.
Which I think is what
Originally,
this is all about.
huh?
That's what this is all about. It's not actually about prisoners, I don't think. They
Well,
are they are trying to reinforce the idea that trans people are transitioning to sneak into spaces that they otherwise would not be allowed into. Just the name of the act being the Real You Act gives the game away.
yeah. Well, and originally the bill was supposed to include minors. Minors were going to be prohibited from changing their gender markers, but it was finally cut down to where only incarcerated people do not have that ability.
And I think because they thought they could get away with that. They
Right.
thought maybe if they added minors, it'd be less of a problem. They think prisoners, they can just get away with it. And again, set up this idea that trans people are not their real selves by
Yeah,
saying calling it the Real You Act. It is a, I don't even know if you can call it a dog whistle.
mm-hmm.
It's a bullhorn.
Yeah, because they're using our language against us. We're saying that this is the real us, and they're pushing back and saying no, this is the real you. And it's just like,
Oh yeah.
you're. How do you know what is right for me? Like, why is it your right to tell me what I am or who I am? That's insane.
This is where we get into the group dynamics and systems, large scale systems, because when you have a dominant factor in society, for the US it's been the American church, there is this attitude that we get to determine what is right and what is wrong. And because all of the concepts of male and female as the only two gender, points in all of society came from Western religion, Western Christian white churches, this dominant attitude is still pretty much saying you have to conform. If you cannot conform to what is normal, what is right, you are a problem. If you're a problem, we need to take away as many rights, as many freedoms, as much access as we can, so that you cannot influence or change the structures, the systems that we are in. We do this at every level of social interaction. We do this in our families. When a little kid, gets to a certain point when they begin to exert their personality, their independence, and their influence in how to determine things for their own lives, parents come back with things such as, you have this curfew. You cannot go to these places. You cannot dress this way. You cannot do this thing. And any family structures that do allow kids to express that independence are looked down upon by the wider societal network. And they're like, why would you let your kids do that? What kind of parents are you? And so there's this social pressure that says, as if we're going to allow whoever this individual is who's trying to exert independence, if we continue to allow them to do this thing, then we lose. We lose our place. We lose our privilege. We use our position or lose our position. And so we have to fight for that, because if we don't have that, we don't get to control the narrative, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to give people the ability to control their own narrative.
Well, and I say this over and over again, that the major push that, the Republican side loves to do is for states' rights, for the right of the states, and thus, the smaller government, and thus the individual to have control over their lives. And it's not. We find that as soon as they pass, they reject federal oversight, and they pass these bills that, allow them to do more of their own governing, immediately they start coming out with stuff that limits the rights of the population.
Yeah.
The part of the population with less voice and obviously less voting power, a lot of the ways is through gerrymandering and other things, but yeah, they'll fight for this, and we're seeing this in a theme tonight in many articles, is that fighting for the right to discriminate and hold down and hold back people, because like you said, in the family structure, if you don't exert your power over someone and keep them down, then you don't have as much power.
Right.
And that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of an equal playing field where everybody has the power and everybody has a say and a decision, a right in the decision.
Yeah. And that's why we do this in family structures, and you can see it all the way up. When a child gets to a certain point where they're beginning to be able to make independent choices for themselves, parents infantilize their growing up children by making it seem like, well, you don't understand the consequences, or you don't understand how that can lead to other things because we've seen that and you're not old enough yet. We see this at every level of societal structures. We see people infantilizing others so that they can retain that control by saying, you don't understand. You haven't learned enough. And people do this all the time. I'm sure you get it, Marla. You don't know biology.
Oh, yeah. All the time.
All the time. It's like, honey, I probably got a better understanding of biology than you and your 10th grade biology teacher. So don't come at me with that kind of energy.
Yeah. I mean, I read up on this stuff all the time. Doesn't mean I'm the most learned, but, the fact that people come at me constantly with things out of a 6th grade biology book is just, it's nonsense.
Right.
What else in the world could you possibly walk in with a 6th grade knowledge of something and be like, this is the end of it. This is the fact. I didn't walk out of my 6th grade math class and be like, I'm going to go work for NASA now. Like, that's not the way that works.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene did it.
You don't have to be smart to be in Congress. That's very clear.
No, you just gotta. Never mind. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut so I don't get banned. Uh, continuing on.
Wannabe Republican lawmaker says quiet. Oh, this is the same one, right? So it's
Yes,
quiet part allowed.
Those articles.
Arizona Republican helped block a trans healthcare ban. Ooh, what's going on here? This sounds fun.
All right, we have been targeting Republicans in a general way and saying that it is Republicans who have been the perpetrators of these pieces of legislation, which, for the most part, is very true. There have been, AM. Yeah, you and Lennon are having a conversation here.
Sorry, I missed that. What was it?
Yeah, muted when she doesn't want to be, unmuted when she wants to be.
Right, exactly. But we've been highlighting that it is coming through Republican sources that these legislative movements to ban transgender affirming healthcare or other things, that is pretty much, solidly in that camp. But in Arizona, one of our least favorite states right now for the bills that they are producing, a Republican state senator stepped out against his party so that they could kill a bill that would have banned gender affirming healthcare for minors. Senator Tyler voted Wednesday against advancing a bill in their Health and Human Services Committee, joining 3 Democrats to create a 4-4 tie, which locked the bill and it could not go any further. Senate Bill 848 would have banned all gender-affirming procedures for people under 18, including hormone treatment and puberty blockers. Now, because of the transphobia and the trans panic that they wanted to create, it also included surgical procedures, which we know are not done. Even going so far as to discount or remove facial feminization surgery. I have not heard of anyone under the age of 18 who's had facial feminization surgery.
No.
Now, I've heard of cosmetic surgery, which is very, very, very controversial for anyone under 18. But I've not heard of anyone under 18 having facial feminization surgery.
I mean, why would you have to be? Generally, especially like the farther you get away from 18, especially if you're on puberty blockers, that masculinization hasn't happened of the face. This is all nonsense.
Yeah, and I don't get the panic. Like, isn't it illegal to get a tattoo if you're under 18? Like, don't you need parental consent for that? Like, what is this? Where does this fear come from? It doesn't make any sense. It's so irrational. We have cultural and legal norms in the United States that, like, you cannot marry children and children can't marry each other, and you can't just go out and get surgery if you're under 18 or even a tattoo and things like that. So I guess it's just that same thing that I always bring up, that they're just trying to hit us from so many angles, that they're trying and demonize us, that they feel like something's going to stick on the wall.
Yeah. Well, and you said it. It's irrational fear. It's not logical. It's not being reasoned out. Mm-hmm. It is claiming, look, all things to the contrary, on March 1st, the sun is going to fall into the ocean. We know it. We know the sun is going to fall into the ocean on March 1st. And there are people who will buy that. But when you start going after kids, when you start saying, we want to make sure that kids don't get tricked into something that is permanent. We don't want kids to be caught up in a fad that they will choose to regret. This is why we hear that being trans is just a trend. This is why we hear detransition is a large percentage of the transgender community. This is why we hear all of these statistics that do not take into account the actual reality of what's happening. Because if it takes the actual reality into account, they cannot account for the crap that they're shoveling.
Yeah, none of it's based on reality. It's craziness.
Okay, not to be pessimistic again, but do we think that this Republican switched sides because he is afraid of making the GOP look even worse in a state that somehow went Democrat in the presidential election? Does he think that if they go too far right, they're going to do even worse next time?
So, if I heard the question correctly,
Yes.
you were asking, did this Republican have a flash of insight that maybe the Republican Party in Arizona could possibly make itself look more assish? Did I hear the question right?
Yeah, but I don't know. They play these strategic games all the time. Like if it might cause enough backlash, especially after they unexpectedly lost that state, they might want to take a few moments to do. I mean, from a Democrat standpoint, it's what the Clintons did. It's triangulation. It's let's do something that the other side would do so that we can't be criticized for it.
Right. Yeah, I know. I don't think that there's any possibility that this individual could do that, though, as a strategic thing, because he's the only one who's making this noise.
Well, if it doesn't pass, then there doesn't have to be a backlash, right?
Yeah, but why wouldn't the other four at least maybe abstain?
True.
Because that would have allowed them to save face. I mean, if they didn't show up for their committee meeting that day because they knew the bill would be voted on, that would have been more strategic. It would allow them to save face and say, you know what, we had an important meeting we had to be in. We had to, go to this campaign fundraiser. We had to go do something to make a bigger impact on the community than being in this committee meeting. These others showed up and said, no, we're going to make sure this goes through. That way we can stop this from happening. So that's where I challenge the idea that this was a strategic move.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that this individual may have looked at it and said, this is stupid.
I
equally
have a hard time believing a Republican to do that, so I'm on the fence here.
I think it is more realistic to say that a single Republican was convinced that science was real and that the Medical Association, the Association of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, the Psychiatric Association, all of these organizations who have been saying, these bills are really wrong, maybe one Republican in all of them finally said, I wonder if they're right.
Still having a hard time believing it.
Yeah. Nah.
Marla and her conspiracy theories are live tonight.
All right. Anti-trans troll busted setting up fake org to trick trans activists into appearing on camera. Is this something nice? Oh yeah, this is the Matt Walsh thing. Jeannie,
this is Matt Walsh.
Is this a you or a Marla thing?
I haven't gotten into this specific instance. I did talk about Matt Walsh a couple of weeks ago.
Hmm.
Um,
With
I'm
his
gonna let Danny
appearance
take
on
this
Phil.
one, but I am very seriously considering making a TikTok about this, except for the fact that I don't want to give this idiot more
Yeah.
publicity.
So here is the deal. Matt Walsh, if anybody doesn't know, is a podcaster for no, not Satan. That's our side, remember?
I can't quite remember where Satan falls on
But anyway,
this.
it's a big, basically a media group. But he is a podcaster with that, and a few weeks ago, he really got bumped up in visibility when he appeared on the not the Phil Donahue, Dr. Phil
Dr.
show.
Phil. Yes, we discussed that while you were gone, I believe.
Okay. So he showed up on there and tried to debunk the existence of non-binary people because of the gender ideology that is being pushed by the left. Right around that time, a sort of a grassroots effort was launched to get transgender people to take part in a documentary. And at the very front, on the front end of it, on the surface, it looked like a legitimate effort. It was being put together by a group called the Gender Unity Project, which sounds really pretty. And the website that they had for it was using the trans color scheme of pink, whites, and blues. What has been uncovered is that this organization was a front and that the people who are behind it are directly connected to Matt Walsh's program. They're producers, they're media directors, they are people who are associated with Matt Walsh. Now, it was I think they're non-binary, Eli Ehrlich, who exposed them on Twitter to show that they had been that the Gender Unity Project had tried to recruit Eli into this documentary, and they went on to show how that they researched the group, they found out who was behind it, they then realized who this person was. They were using modified names to kind of obscure the individuals who were involved in this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're really the Matt Walsh group is really going out of their way to try to to mask the idea that they're wanting to rope transgender people into this thing, and eventually that this would be more of a targeted attack on the transgender community than it would be about portraying an accurate and positive image on the transgender community.
Yeah, and I think Eli also found documentation or something, that just evidence of a quote from Matt Walsh that they were going to basically set fire to the whole trans I don't know, whatever they'd want to call it, myth or whatever it is, this push for trans existence, basically, that they were going to do a scorched earth thing.
Right after the Dr. Phil show, Matt Walsh made a statement and said, if you thought the Dr. Phil show was something, you ought to see what we've got coming up next. And intimated that he was going to be doing something to basically destroy the gender ideology that is being pushed by the left.
That's it, yeah.
And while he did not come out and say this was what was going to be done, he did make the intimation that he was going to be involved in something. And so now we're looking at this project. I did reach out to a local organization called Interform. They are situated here in Springdale, Arkansas, which is just down the road from me. They are a legitimate trans affirming organization, and they are doing a documentary, but they had not made a statement as of the time that I reached out to them. But I just want to say to anybody out there, if somebody reaches out to you and asks for you to be a part of a documentary, or you see an open call for participants in some type of media gathering like that, take the time to vet that project. If you don't know how to do that, you can reach out to Marla or I, and we will help you do that work. Both of us have done a lot of the work of just trying to get behind stuff to make sure that we know that it is authentic and that it does truly represent what it says it's going to do. But if you hear anything like that, please reach out to us, let us know, and we'll make sure that that is authentic and helpful.
I mean, like, I'm always paranoid about stuff when it comes to this, and now I'm even more paranoid because, I do get reached out to fairly regularly to be involved in podcasts or whatever it might be,
Right.
News
just to
shows,
have a
yeah.
discussion, and I'm just not. Now I'm gonna be like extra crazy anxious about it because
Yeah.
a lot of times there's small organizations that there's not enough information on for me to confirm one way or the other
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
Also, Matt Walsh is just an absolute asshole. He has no. I mean, I don't want to be elitist, but this man walks around like he knows everything in the goddamn world. Doesn't hold a degree. I don't even know if he holds a high school degree. Certainly doesn't hold a college degree. Wants to pretend like he's the master of biology and anthropology and sociology.
Oh, God. He is so, I mean, he carries the look of academic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hilarious that he tries to, affect the image of somebody who is learned and studied in these areas, but he's really not.
Yeah. I mean, even though we discussed on the Dr. Phil show, I mean, like, there's no argument to be made when you go in with these schlocky, well-known anti-trans arguments that the only reason you look like you're winning is because you are giving a reductive answer that requires no thought. So you give this straight, quick answer, and we're forced to give like a detailed, nuanced answer.
Right.
Yeah.
He's scum. And there's no surprise that certain people who I have had negative interactions with are obsessed with getting his attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a shyster. His skill is in debate and turning your words against you. And like you said, utilizing quips and quick language to turn your argument against you and force you to be the one to have all the facts and to present all the actual information. And he just rebuts and rejects it without any, without having to do the work on his end. It's crazy. But it's just kind of funny, yeah, his lack of credential, and considering that, he's popped back up to the surface after being on Dr. Phil, who, notoriously, he didn't have the credentials. Is he even actually a doctor, Jeannie?
He hasn't had a degree since, I think, 2006, I want to say.
Did they pull it?
So
not a degree, sorry, a license since 2006.
He's unlicensed, okay, but he was at one point.
Okay, so here's the thing. The show on CBS, Bull, is actually based on what Dr. Phil used to do.
Oh, I've auditioned for that show.
Did you?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, what Dr. Phil used to do, that is basically what the show Bull was about. And he made his way into prominence because he happened to be a friend of Oprah's. That's how he got his place.
I mean, I said it, whatever it was 2 weeks ago. I will never forgive Oprah Winfrey for giving us this man.
Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz were both products of Oprah Winfrey.
Okay, getting a little bit more somber again. Trans student viciously attacked after high school basketball game. I guess it's a sports article, and I'm not prepared to take it. Ginny, are you?
No, I'll go ahead and take this one. There was a basketball game at the North Attleboro High School in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, and a teenager was confronted by some other students. There was a verbal altercation that happened. Then the argument was continued into the parking lot, and there was a physical altercation that happened as a result of that. The individual is a transgender female, and she was not seriously injured, but it was still an attack on this person. And, it leaves a message for the LGBTQ teen community to say, are they safe in their own schools? Not every school is safe, as we've been able to see, but this is still evidence that our kids are not safe. Yeah, our younger generation, we love our younger generation because they are more accepting, they are more open, they are more understanding, but they still are influenced by horrible people who are adults.
Yeah.
And they still carry that around with them into their own lives.
Discrimination and bigotry is taught, and as long as there are still people teaching it,
Yeah.
there will still be people perpetuating it.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry, I had to give a definition for something.
A young trans woman allegedly shot by brother in an honor killing. What the actual hell is going on here?
So I bring this to attention because it does have a little bit of an impact on U.S. issues, but a 23-year-old trans woman who was in Iraqi Kurdistan was killed by her brother. She was a makeup artist at a salon, and the idea of honor killing is the idea that the family has the right to carry out justice when in some way an individual has brought shame on the family. And in this case, because she had gone out and transitioned into an experience of living as a female, if she, and now this is my understanding of Islamic law, so if I get this wrong, forgive me. I just know the surface of this. But in Islam, there is room for the acceptance of transgender people. But the thing is, body modification has to be a part of that. And recognition of that has to be gained through what would be the, essentially the court system. If this woman who was killed had not yet gone through that process to gain that recognition, her brother took it upon himself to kill her because she was bringing dishonor on the family for breaking Islamic law. And I know that we are we're very quick to jump in here and say, this is horrible, this is backwards, this is something that we need to, remove the ability of. But This is something that we have to take very, very, very carefully, because applying Western understandings of crime and law and justice and honor in another culture is problematic. Was it right for us? No. Was it right in that situation? Obviously, the brother did not think so because he fled the country. So, I brought all of that in to say what made this wrong is that the brother knew it. The brother knew he was wrong and he fled because, in his act of doing what he considered to be honorable, he brought shame on his family. So he was fleeing basically because he knew he would be held accountable for that in a system that would have possibly let him go.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last week too. These organizations and now even cultural things, but a lot of times it comes from religion, where the religion on the surface is supposed to be about acceptance and the love of God and all that kind of stuff, and it's permitting people to take judgment into their own hands. And just the term honor killing is the part that really bugs me about this. Like, it should be done to someone who is trans and hasn't followed all the proper steps. It's just
Right.
it's just disheartening to see in how many different ways that religion is used to bolster people and to say that, like, yes, go forth and you make the judgment and you be the jury and executioner in this person's case. It's just disheartening.
Yeah, it is. This is a trigger warning for the next news item. There are themes of sexual assault.
Okay. I think we just need a trigger warning the entire show these days, because it's just it gets rough.
We've done some good stuff.
I hope so. Yeah. There's just a lot of bad people out there. All right. So a trans woman alleges 3 sexual assaults at NYC's Riker Island jail. Another instance of an inmate getting sexually assaulted. Jeannie, what's going on in this case?
Okay, so we did a story, I want to say about a month or so ago, about a transfer of a bunch of transgender individuals who were incarcerated in Rikers Island to a female facility at a different site. There's been a lot of accusations that there were assaults that were happening to transgender female inmates on Rikers Island. Lettie Brockington, 31, was being held on robbery charges. She had not been convicted. She had not been sentenced. She was only being held on charges. She did not have the ability to make bail at that time. She had asked several times to be moved to a woman's unit somewhere in the system. But the request was pretty much written off. Between her arrest in May of 2020 and later in the year, she had been housed at Rikers on and off. Her first assault occurred after she'd been in about a month. She'd been placed on a suicide watch. And according to her report, a corrections officer opened her cell to another inmate, who then choked her and committed an assault on her sexually. She was then transferred to a women's unit, but sent back in December to the men's unit. After being in the men's unit, she was assaulted in a shower, and she suffered another assault a week later. In investigating this, she reported all of the incidents. She went to Bellevue Hospital for examination. There was a rape kit done each time, and there was evidence of male assault. The thing to keep in mind, she had not been convicted nor tried. She was only being held until her trial. She was finally able to get bail and get out of the prison, but she was returned on another robbery complaint. So this is crazy, y'all, how the prison systems are working right now.
And it's just heartbreaking to hear, that she went back in on another complaint. It's you're struggling to make bail, and I don't know. Like I said, without knowing her circumstances, it's just
I mean, we didn't mention that just to understand how common this is, especially among queer people. There was an incident in 2019 where a transgender inmate died of an epileptic seizure at Rikers. The guards had not checked on her like they were supposed to every 15 minutes. Left her for a long time. She died. They were sued for $5.9 million. And then just this last September, there was a gay black man who died at Rikers while being held on a $1 bail. He was able to pay it, but apparently some restrictions were in place because of a separate charge in New Jersey. And yeah, this man was on a $1 bail, not allowed to leave, and died on their watch.
lots of choruses of disgusting. All right, moving on.
I'm trying to address something Midvani said back on the previous article.
Oh, yeah.
That just because something is part of a foreign culture does not give it a pass. Wrong is wrong, and we need to make sure the world knows that it is not okay. Midvani, I really want to have a conversation with you about that statement that you made, but I cannot do this on a live broadcast, so I would really like to do this over in the Discord server if possible. So could you tag me over there, and we can do that in Behind Open Doors, or we can do that in one of the mature conversation channels, please. Thank you.
Okay. Or would you like to just do it in the Transistance chat? I mean, we do have.
We can do it in Transistance chat. Yeah, that's fine too.
That's good, because there are a couple other people that I mean, Quentin had comments in there too. So.
Okay.
Open it up. I like that. All right. A trans teen afraid to leave home because of bullying. Mother says the school's not helping. I mean, shock, right? What's happening here, Jeannie?
Riley Rogers is 13 years old. He lives in Tameside, UK. And in November, he began to experience different forms of bullying and other forms of hostility. His notebook torn up, thrown out a window, hit with a backpack. But worst was when he began to socially transition. He went to an LGBTQ club meeting at his school, and when he went to the shopping center afterwards, a group of students grabbed his bag, destroyed it, and threatened to beat him with some nearby plastic crates. The young man also believed that the assailants had recorded the entire attack on their cell phones. So now Riley is extremely upset, experiences from an inability to go outside his home because he's been traumatized, which is, yeah, that is very realistic. But the school, is basically stonewalling and saying that they're not doing anything to make sure that he is in a safe environment when he's at school. They're not doing anything to find out if those who have attacked him are being held to bring accountability to them. And we have to step in and let our kids know that they're safe. And if the schools are not going to do that, we need parent organizations, we need social organizations, we need other people who are going to step in there and say, we want our kids to be safe. So if you're in the UK, while right now it sucks to be a transgender person in the UK, still let's make an effort to stand up, doing whatever we can to let these kids know that they are important.
I mean, first off, not to make light, but like it just harkens back to Shelley Luther, right? Who's running this school? Like, what? How is the GOP says they want a safe learning environment for students, safe from these topics, safe from this, safe from that. How about safe from physical goddamn harm?
Yeah.
How about that's where we fucking start instead of trying to shield your children from facts?
Right.
Also, I mean, we brought this up 2-3 articles ago. It comes down to the parents. You have to be taught this.
Mm-hmm.
You have got to be taught to hate people.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, this is not kids learning this behavior from kids. It's not growing from kids up. It's coming from parents down. It's coming from society down. It's coming from the news media down. It's coming from an individual who will not be named, who's written a very, very popular set of young adult novels, who is still saying things like transgender women are just male predators. Those people are creating a platform of learning for children who are growing up. And those kids are learning it so well that they're willing to test it out on their peers.
Yeah, and like I keep saying, that they're not only justifying deriding, hating, and looking down on trans people, but they're also making the violence okay. It's all right. Like, you attack somebody for being trans, you record the entire thing on your cell phone. No phones are going to be confiscated or looked at. There's going to be nothing looked into this, in any way. The kid is afraid of going to school. So we know they are students within that school. So that school has every power and every right to do what it can to keep its students safe when there are acts of violence like this. So it's just chicken. It's not scared. It's actively, with your inactivity, you're putting forth something. You're showing that it's okay. You're showing your support for it by your inactivity, saying there's nothing we can do about it when everybody in the situation knows there is. And so you're just under your breath. You're just saying it's okay to do what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Norway ready to add gender-neutral pronoun hen to official language. Here's something sort of positive, finally.
No, this is positive. It's not even sort of positive. As we debate in the American English the place of they, them as singular pronouns, Norway is adding a new gender neutral pronoun to the official language. The word hen is going to be an alternative to the Norwegian feminine hun and the masculine han. So, from now on, we're beginning in this spring, there's going to be this new word that is added to the vocabulary so that people can, definitely participate. Now, there are already gender neutral pronouns like they or they or z that are used by people of all genders, and some non-binary people use they. But by creating a new word that is not feminine, not masculine, but yet somewhere in the middle of that, does create a bit of recognition and visibility.
Now, I didn't read too deep into this article, and I'm gonna hope the answer is no, and I'm almost gonna assume it's no. Has this received the sort of backlash that occurred a few months ago when French dictionaries decided to add gender neutral terms?
We haven't seen any news on that yet. Nothing as of today had been entered into the news cycle. So
It says a lot about the French. I mean, I'm not even saying that as a joke. We all know that protecting language is not just, in these cases, transphobic. It is xenophobic.
mhm.
And I'm not saying that Norway does not have xenophobia. They definitely do. But France is notoriously xenophobic.
I don't want to interrupt the French audience's opinion of it. So I'm going to stay quiet on that one. But yeah, you're right.
Well, and I don't know what I want to say here, because it's a difficult conversation to have. I believe it to my core that your pronouns are something that you own and are something you get to choose. I think there's something to be said for normalization and to help the non-binary community to have normalized language that is, especially something that is nationally socialized, and nationally accepted. I think that goes a long way to, again, proving that we're here, that we're valid, and that we deserve to be here. And we keep talking about all the confusion that the opponents are trying to sow, that hate groups are trying to sow about who we truly are. And so something like this, where it's nationally standardized as a non-binary term, I think that goes a long way towards solving some of that.
Yeah.
All right, moving over slightly, we're gonna go eastward to Russia. Russian government launches chilling bid to liquidate LGBT network persecution at its finest. It's interesting. We've been talking so much about the potential of Russia's invasion, and now they're doing other things. What's going on here, Gene?
Right. So the Justice Ministry in Russia filed a lawsuit against the Sphere Charitable Foundation, a human rights association, and the legal entity that the Russian LGBT network operates under and has done so for almost 20 years. The ministry has argued that all the activities of the Sphere Charitable Foundation run contrary to the state policy designed to preserve, expand, and develop human capital within the nation. So basically, it is a matter of saying that the Russian government has stepped in to say that this organization has been working counterproductively to all of the good that the Russian government has been doing to preserve and expand and develop the human rights of people within the country. Now, if you don't know how my sarcasm works, keep in mind that this is the same country that's been known to commit atrocities against its own people just because the president was having a bad day. This is not something. Russia is not known for its human rights activities.
No.
Jailing people of sexual orientation that is outside the traditional is not uncommon.
That's the thing
that
gets me.
Well, at least it's not the Soviet Union. No, it's just the Soviet Union under new ownership.
Yeah. A literal former member of the guard of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Well, and the chilling thing here in the head or the subhead is, that this organization goes against traditional values, contrary to traditional values, and that's just a term that it's getting to where, growing up there was like a romanticism to it, and now it's just the nastiest term. It's the most hateful term you could probably throw out there now.
Yeah. Well, when we were growing up, the idea of traditional values seemed so much more peaceful to us because we were growing up with the traditional values of Happy Days and 8 is Enough and Leave It to Beaver and all of these shows that we watched on a regular basis in the afternoon and in the evenings, where traditional values were being presented as, even families who aren't, typically formed, they're still traditional. Now we know that those traditional values are essentially the hidden trauma of individuals who didn't have an avenue to talk about what was happening to them. We know that the good old days of the 50s were not the good old days. That there was so much going on at that point that the only thing that is traditional about traditional values is not spilling the tea about what's happening in the family. That's what's traditional. And for those of us who believe in a healthy environment for human beings to prosper and flourish, fuck traditional values.
Yeah, and screw hiding. That's the thing. We're all about openness and honesty, and that scares the hell out of a lot of people because it's like, no, you within the lines and making everything look perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Let me know if you need to get moving on here to get prepped for your show.
I do need to get moving on.
Okay, should we call it here? Or do you want to do one more?
I need to hop over there because I was given instructions to do something new tonight. So I need to read the instructions. Even though I do not have a guest and I'm doing a solo show, I still got to figure out what the heck I'm doing.
Okay.
So I need to duck out. Thank you all very much.
Fair enough. Thanks, Keeney.
Tonight on Behind Open Doors, which will be coming up in about 20 minutes, I will be talking about found family and intentional community. So, hope you'll stick with me as we continue on into our next show. Until next show or next week, we'll see y'all later.
All right. Brilliant gender
Why don't
fluid
we?
nuclear expert and LGBT plus activist lands crucial job in Biden administration. Do you know enough about this one to run it?
I don't. I was gonna say let's jump to entertainment.
There we go. Okay. So Biden has appointed oh, missed it. Biden has appointed a gender fluid person, Sam Brinton, to a high-ranking post in the Department of Energy, and yeah, I just think it's great to see much more LGBT representation in the administration. That's
Yeah.
great to hear.
This
Again,
is,
going
this
back
is
to it,
two, right?
what's that?
This is two major people thus far in this administration who are trans or non-binary, and I don't know if there's ever been any in any administration before this.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time I've heard of it. So,
Yeah.
and considering all the backlash and against trans people being mentioned anywhere, I would think that it would be brought up.
Yeah.
So it's just very great to see. They make the statement, in this role, I'll be doing what I always dreamed of doing, leading the effort to solve the nation's nuclear waste challenges. I'll do all I can to bring innovative thought into this government role. I'll even be, to my knowledge, the first gender fluid person in federal government leadership. And again, that's wonderful representation. This is good pushback and good. This hopefully this will prove out some of that good, in contrast to what people say about, saying bad things about trans people, like the words don't hurt, words don't have any influence on people's safety or any of that kind of stuff. That's why the representation is so important, because that's complete and total BS. And the words that are against trans people and marginalizing the trans community makes it okay for people to hold their beliefs and then go out and act on them, and showing people in high-ranking posts and showing that they have the support of the highest ranking office in the country, hopefully will kind of help normalize people. I love the fact that this person is there because of their qualifications, and it's not a very public facing job. It's just someone smart doing a job that needs to be done, and not just some kind of figurehead thing that, hey, look, we've got a trans person, out here in front. So I love that. Did you have anything else to say about that, Marla?
No, I mean it's what I always say. It doesn't just have to. I always used, before I became what I am on TikTok now. It always used to be about trans representation, and it doesn't just have to be TV and film. It can be a government post as well. Yeah, I know this one is not as particularly front facing, but we at least have one transgender person in a very public facing position in the U.S. government, and that does a lot. No matter how much hate is constantly thrown at her.
All right, let's see if we can find the first entertainment article. Is Eddie's the
Let's
first
skip
one?
the TikTok. Let's skip the TikTok one and end with that. Let's pick one of the other two and then go back to TikTok, because I have a lot to say about TikTok.
Bump it a little bit. I think I got this. All right. Okay, so first up, we're going to be talking about Eddie.
Yeah.
Eddie Izzard bags lead role as Dr. Nina Jekyll in modern reimagining of classic horror film. This sounds right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see exactly what this is. It'll be interesting with Eddie Izzard, because Eddie Izzard has proved herself capable of doing serious work, but is generally known as a comedian. She's now, and I thought, well, let me explain what this thing is. So they're doing a Jekyll and Hyde remake, where she's playing basically a female version of Dr. Jekyll. And that's, we really don't know too much about it, other than it is some kind of modern retelling of it. It's very I don't know what to expect from it, because they're making it very serious, and especially now that Eddie is presenting more feminine and is more visibly transgender than she ever has been.
Hmm.
um, it would have been very easy for them to turn this into a comedy, and I'm very glad that they didn't, because that is generally the first instinct with things like this, is trans people are a joke and let's make it a joke. But that doesn't seem to be what this is, and that's really exciting. I want to see what they do with this, and I wish I had more information to give to you about it.
Hmm. Well, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And like the show we were talking about last week, how well supported is it going to be? How well promoted is it going to be? Are they really going to give it a fair chance? Is this is a series or a film?
It's a film, I believe.
Okay.
I mean, the good news is it's Eddie Izzard, and even transphobes love Eddie Izzard to some extent, is what I have found.
Hmm.
I think they find Eddie Izzard more palatable for some reason or another. I don't know that they're for the best reasons, but they do.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and Eddie was an interesting one for a minute there when, as I was understanding my trans identity, like there was sort of a shift in my perspective of what he represented for the community. And it was sort of a relief for me when he came out, when they came out as transgender. Now their identity appears to be gender fluid. You've been using she her pronouns, it seems.
yes, Eddie's been going, I think, by only she as of late.
Okay.
Um, this says gender fluid. Eddie Izzard has been very up in the air about how she identifies.
Hmm.
At this point, it's been back and forth for a long time, over a number of years, so I don't exactly know what's um, where she currently stands, but she has been presenting more as a woman, it seems, recently, than as gender fluid as she did in her earlier career.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a time where you would always see her in makeup and drag, and then there was sort of a an in-between period where that was only in certain performances, but in general you would see them in masculine form. And
Yeah.
so, I think that was the time when I was starting to kind of have a little bit of issue with it, of just like um, that ability to take it off and put it aside when it doesn't help you.
Yeah.
Whereas uh, fully coming out and accepting that as an identity and pushing forward with it, I think really does, help the
Yeah, she's
look.
had a very long journey through a
Mhm.
lot of gender.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to shame that journey in any way, because Lord knows that my journey was a very, very long one as well. And so
Mhm.
I totally understand that. It's just, I guess I'm just saying that it's nice to see them being able to fully embrace a trans identity, even though there's some fluidity to it while they're trying to figure out and understand exactly what their identity is. I think that's
Yep.
that's important and that's beautiful. Let's go to the right button here. Is it? It is time to start celebrating Black asexuality in media. Is this? Yeah, this is one of yours.
Yeah. So Legends of Tomorrow, which is a show on CW, has introduced a asexual superhero, Spooner. The character is, or rather, the actress and the character are black. Um, and this article, when I first read it, it didn't occur to me why this was so important. Of course, there's a severe lack of BIPOC, um, queer representation in the media, but why asexual specifically was kind of something I had to look into and really, think about.
Hmm.
Um, most asexual characters, now that there are starting to be, are generally they're white. They're characters like Sheldon or Sherlock Holmes, who are just engrossed in their work, or awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely are they very human in the way that they act and present in the world, and empathetic and emotional and can connect.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so important within the Black community is because there's been so much, both at the same time, sexualization and desexualization, and dehumanizing of Black people within media, from different types of stereotypes. This specifically talks about the dehumanization and the desexualization with the Mammy stereotype and the sexualization with the Jezebel stereotype. Now we have a character that is taking that, those caricatures and saying, no, we are human and we are not to be sexualized and we are not to be desexualized. Our existence is not about our sexualization.
Mm-hmm.
We are human and we deserve to be taken, considered in the same manner as everyone else and taken just as seriously.
Well, yeah, and it's a very interesting dialogue to get into, especially. I mean, I have no place in it as a privileged white person, but looking from the outside and seeing the fact that Black trans women are in greater danger from within their own community. You start to look at it from the outside and think that there is a hyper masculinity. There is that men are supposed to be tough and and really tough, strong sexual beings and all of that, and the sensitivity, the feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that are derided and not welcome in that group. And so I think when you start to talk about asexuality and allow that to be a thing in the community, talk about it, that like this, the people are like this, and it's not just your nerds, it's not just the people to be looked down on. Then again, I think it's an important step for normalization and for breaking down that hyper masculinity and that just narrative that's very toxic.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's real, some of it is the result of um, the way white culture has treated people of color and, sort of almost projected their own. Um, they've almost, they've, because the white culture has seen Black culture in a certain way, it's almost been forced upon them in some ways, at least from this privileged white person's perspective. And I think that's what they're saying in this article.
Interesting.
And that this is very nice. This is a way of um, separating the two, creating a more even playing field, a more even viewpoint of the Black community
Mm-hmm.
by having characters like this.
Yeah. Yeah, always, anytime you can add that into a character, add dynamism and just more of the human experience. It humanizes people.
Yeah.
That you can't hold these stereotypes anymore when you've got characters that are truly human, that are all over the board, that are complex, and that have unique and in some ways challenging characteristics. Norm challenging characteristics, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, this is, it was very enlightening to read this because the immediate implications of it beyond, oh, it's nice to have queer Black representation, was not clear to me. And this article did a great job, and the actor playing the role did a great job of breaking down why this is so important.
That's great. I guess that's it then for entertainment, other than the TikTok story. Shall we move on to that one? You ready
Yeah,
for
let's
that?
see how fast I can get through this
Okay.
nonsense. Um, so TikTok has announced that they are going to update their community guidelines. I think it's more an issue of actually following their community guidelines, giving them specifics, in saying that they're going to put an end to transphobic, homophobic, and misogynistic harassment. The major one that has come into play and discussion is they say that they are banning the misgendering, the dead naming of trans people, and any promotion of conversion therapy.
Mm.
As anyone who's watched my stuff knows, and most trans creators on TikTok know, TikTok has been awful to trans creators, any marginalized group, honestly. Same with Black creators, queer creators besides trans people. But clearly they enforce rules on us more than they enforce it on other people, when their guidelines claim to do the exact opposite. So this all sounded great and good, but I've already run into a few problems.
Okay.
They're clear, even though they said this is not being implemented for another month, it is clearly, from what I've seen, started to creep in already. Moderators are already kind of taking the cue to use this. And it seems, my experience thus far is I've watched a lot of misgendering comments be removed, which was almost impossible before, which
Okay,
is
good.
great.
Mm-hmm.
The secondary account of who has been removed that was, harassing me has been
Martha's
removed.
arch
So
nemesis, yes.
yeah. Nemesis, specifically with a
See?
CIS. And that's great and all, but I've also been seeing it used against us because I personally got a post ban the other day, like the day after this was announced. All of my posts in the past that have been flagged or banned have been because I was fighting hate speech. Someone would say something extremely transphobic, I would report it. TikTok would go, that's not hate speech. But then me saying why it's hate speech is, of course, hate speech. I don't know if it's the existence of the hate speech within a video rather than in a comment. Regardless,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm fighting the hate speech, you should not be attacking me.
Yes.
And
Or banning
TikTok
you or
also has
timing
this,
you out. Yes.
yeah, TikTok has this other issue of if you get something flagged and it gets appealed, it's still held against you, which is absurd. So the other day I got a flag for a comment that was the most nonsensical flag I think I've ever got. I was in Kat, cousin Kat, who's been on things here on the Transverse. I basically they had put up a video of someone who was transphobic, and I went, oh, I recognize that person from blah, blah, blah's live stream, and that somehow got flagged. And I went, well, this is nonsense. So I was already on thin ice, which felt like there was some moderator going after me.
Oh, okay.
But then I got a post ban the next day for, believe it or not, something in my private videos. And I had a transphobic comment. I usually make a tiny little video when there's a transphobic comment, save it to my drafts, go back and make it later. I needed to get back to the original comment because I needed some more context. So I made it a private video so I could go back to the original comment. So this is a 1.7-second video of someone else's transphobic comment and my face and TikTok, and no one else in the world could see it. And TikTok gave me a post ban. And since reporting on that on my TikTok, I've heard multiple people tell multiple stories that ever since they announced this new thing, they have had drafts and private videos similarly where it's someone else's transphobic comment be taken down and used against them.
Mm-hmm.
So TikTok doesn't seem to know who's the bad guy and who's not. Now, I almost feel like I've seen it get better over the next few days after that. My video did do fairly well about it. But now today, and even during the show, I've been informed. I don't know if you were privy to this transgender woman who clearly wants to be the next Blair White, who showed up this week to basically invalidate every non-binary person and every trans person who doesn't pass. Um, she has been saying some horrendous stuff, and I think TikTok had this moment of, oh my God, we're punishing the people we're supposed to be protecting, and they don't know who's the bad guy. She's
Yeah.
saying utterly transphobic shit, anti-Semitic shit on top of it, misgendering trans people. But because she's trans, she's not being held accountable. I've had comments from her under review for like 5 days now that were clearly misgendering. Some were anti-Semitic.
Against you.
Some were against me. Most were against other people. And TikTok is not doing anything about it. And now, during the show, a trans feminine person who I know messaged me saying they had made a video response to her misgendering this person, my friend, and TikTok took the video down of the reply to the transphobic misgendering comment. So TikTok does not know who to apply these guidelines to. Originally, and probably still some extent, they still didn't understand, to, like, when cis people said transphobic things, it's not against the rules for trans people to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And now
That was a weird thing.
This weird rare case, they're like, well, that's a trans person. I thought trans people can't be transphobic. Like, there's no one on that team who has any concept of what transphobia is, what it is to be transgender. I mean, we've seen it time and time again where they do not recognize transphobic stereotypes, and they don't recognize 41%. They don't recognize Buffalo Bill things. They don't recognize Ace Ventura things. Like, nobody there knows anything about our community, so they don't know how to actually deal with these comments and this transphobia. And I'll say this about their new guidelines. Great. In the end, I don't give two shits about you doing something about misgendering and dead naming comments if you're not doing anything about blatantly transphobic videos that demonize and try to invalidate us. This is pennies. It is nothing compared to videos that just make us out to be perverted or liars or delusional or whatever. That is what TikTok needs to start dealing with.
Yeah. Aren't they Chinese owned? Kind of keep going back to that and where their moral compass comes from in a lot of these things. It's like, oof, I don't know. I see a lot of people doing really well on TikTok. I know that that's a great way for publicity and things like that, and I just can't get myself to really get into it because of all the horrible things.
I mean, there's a consistent discussion among trans people. Especially recently, saying we need a new platform because we are not safe here.
Yeah. But the platform with the views, that's tough. All right. I am going to do an article that I brought forth. That's personal. That's from a friend, and I don't think you won't know anything about this, Marla. So I'll put it out here, and then we'll talk about it here.
Okay.
Okay. So Perry High School in Gilbert, Arizona was the spot for some Republican ridiculousness this week because of the school's strict permission slip policy for sharing media and subject matters outside of the approved textbooks. The policy states that any movie or documentary, written content, book, article, etc., requires parental permission if the text was written by an author who is part of the LGBTQ plus community. 2, it mentions or alludes to sexual orientation, example, a gay character. 3, mentions or alludes to gender identity, a character who is non-binary, for example. 4, mentions or alludes to physical attraction. Okay. 5, there are no sexual scenes, and no is capitalized here, both letters, N-O, but there are sexual allusions, not illusions, but, alluding to sexual scenes or themes. Then they give some examples of the books that would require parental permission. Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Hamlet, basically anything Shakespeare, apparently, The Great Gatsby, and Of Mice and Men. So why has this particular thing moved from being infuriating to being hilarious this week? Is that students in a home ec class were sent home with a permission slip to allow them to participate in a class about the anatomy of poultry, particularly that they will be covering the parts of poultry and, quote, we will be fabricating a chicken in class, and discussion of the breastbone and breast meat. So I think Marley, you kind of see where this is going. And it's freaking hilarious. First off, though, they're fabricating chicken, which I think is incredible. They can actually make chickens now. I think that solves the whole chicken and egg question. They've figured that out. That's great. So yeah, it's the fact that they are talking about breast bones, breast meat in a class about cooking chicken, that they had to send home a permission slip with these kids.
What's happening?
Well, see, one of the issues that I have here is just the hypersexualization of women to the point where their bodies are the parts of their bodies are so obscene that you can't even mention them the same word in a completely different context. Like I said, I think it goes back to that hypersexualization of women, and I think it's disgusting. I think I just
in that case, no kickball. You can't have balls. We can't talk about balls.
Yeah.
Write a fucking permission slip if you're gonna play any sport that has balls in it.
Well, and let's not forget that it ignores the entire fact that men have breasts and breastbones, as does almost every animal on the planet.
I want to go back to they have to. If it was written by an LGBTQIA plus writer, there has
it
could be a cookbook. Could be a cookbook.
Yes.
And they have to. Remind me where this was?
This is in Gilbert, Arizona.
I'm floored by this one.
Right?
This is such an incredibly new level of stupid. I mean, these are the people who are crying about people being snowflakes, and they're having to write letters home because the breastbone of a chicken is mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what I can't make heads or tails of this. This is one of the dumbest articles we've ever covered.
Exactly, right? And that's what I loved, and that's why I had to bring it forward, because this permission slip isn't out of the norm for what we've been seeing. We've brought up articles of books being banned and calls for burnings and things like that for anything that mentions LGBT situations or characters or is written by an LGBT person. And so this is how that permission slip policy starts. That's where it starts off. But then it also includes the sexuality stuff, and then it ends up in this just absolutely bizarre scenario. I mean, I'm glad that we're reporting on the fact that you can't talk about chicken breasts and not some trans students that are in this school being horribly discriminated against. I can't imagine being at a school like this and feeling like, okay, I've got, in this context, I have to come out. Like, that's a lot
You
more
know,
courage than
and
I would have had.
just to make a funny joke, because I don't know how else to fucking attack this. I hope these permission slips are digital, because with the rules they're setting forth, I cannot imagine the amount of paper that's gonna be used.
Well, and I just love that they're sexualizing chickens. You know, like that's essentially what they're doing, and I mean, can you blame them? That's a pretty hot chicken. I mean, you have to admit you'd hit that, right?
Chickens are, I gotta tell you, they're one of the most trans animals. Like, it is not uncommon for female chickens to start growing uh, male chicken appendages and feathering patterns and all that. It's one of the more common examples
Hmm.
from what I've been reading recently.
Yeah, but
So
you
I'm
would
not
never.
surprised that they're going after the chickens. The chickens are trans. They have breasts,
How dare they?
all around perverted, unacceptable animals.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, we've taken enough of Jeannie's time up here. It's a bit after 7, so we're gonna pass the torch over to Jeannie. She's in the chat being like, "What the hell?" But I thought this was a fun one to end on and one we had to bring up before cutting it. So, Marla, thank you so much for a great show.
Thank you.
Everybody in chat, thank you so much, and stay tuned now for Jeannie on Behind Open Doors, doing an AMA and talking about found family. Very important to us here at the Transverse, as that's what we're trying to build. We love you, and I will see you tomorrow for the Transgender Show.